Hollow Knight is a pretty tough game. Unless, of course, you can kill everything in one hit. But what if that same logic applies to you? Hollow Knight is already a game that's been challenge run to death. There's something about games that are already difficult, and people want to make them even more insanely difficult. That being said, it's the first episode in our challenge review series where we get to look at some mods. The second I caught a glimpse of some of these mods, I knew exactly what I wanted to do for my challenge run. One of my favorite game series of all time is the Devil May Cry games. Even then, they can be kinda hit or miss. But there's an unlockable difficulty in these games called Heaven or Hell, where both the player and enemies die in just one hit. And it's fun since you have guns. And with great guns comes shooting everything to death instantly. Hollow Knight doesn't have guns. Well, usually it doesn't have guns. So what would a Heaven or Hell difficulty look like in this game? Would it be stupidly easy or deceptively challenging? The Hollow Knight Heaven or Hell run starts here. This is a story-light, lore-heavy game. There's a great amount of world building and secrets to discover. NPCs scattered throughout the world whose only purposes are to share little tidbits of lore with you. You can even obtain an item called the Dream Nail, which allows you to peer into the minds of things. All this only allows you to discover even more secrets. There's many interesting things to discover and read about. Though I have to be clear, when it comes to the story, there's not that much given to you. You play as the Knight, just a mysterious little creature that sets off on an unknown quest for an unknown reason. As you play through the game, you'll discover some information about your past and overall purpose. A once flourishing kingdom was plagued with infection, and their king searched for a way to stave off the plague, no matter the cost. A vessel tainted by emotion is now sealed by the Dreamers, which is a temporary solution to their impending doom. These are some of the themes you'll come across in your journey. And there's plenty more lore and world building to discover. Though if you're simply searching for a game that lets you jump in, explore, and kill things, then you're on the right track. You don't have to understand the story to enjoy Hollow Knight, but it is a very interesting one that is definitely worth looking into. It's a pretty solitary adventure, and so I always felt comforted whenever I encountered an NPC who was willing to share a bit of their story with me. Hollow Knight is one of the best and hardest Metroidvanias out there. In case you don't know what a Metroidvania is, they're a genre of games that take elements from similar 2D Castlevania and Metroid titles. Hollow Knight has huge sprawling maps to explore with many secret areas that are gated off by the abilities you have. For example, you might spot a ledge that is too high to reach. In this case, it may be good to make a mental note of the area so that you can return later once you have some double jump or wall jump shenanigans to play with. Exploration and backtracking are not only encouraged, but kind of required to progress in some places. It's fairly easy to get lost since you can tackle areas in different orders, and the game doesn't give you a whole ton of mission trackers or anything like that. Instead, you have a handy dandy map that you can purchase for each area. If you hear some humming and find what appears to be some pages sprawled out on the ground, then you're in the presence of the eccentric map maker, Cornifer, who will sell you a map of the area you're in, which you can purchase for some geo. A geo is dropped from many sources, but you lose your geo whenever you die. In typical Dark Souls fashion, you can return to where you died and fight a shade to reclaim your geo. If you die before this, then it's gone for good. A geo can be used to not only purchase maps, but you can purchase charms and charm slots and a bunch of other things. Charms are little ability augmenting accessories that change little things like give you more health or increased attack range. Charms can be equipped at benches, which act as your checkpoints, as you'll always spawn back at the last bench you sat at. Which brings us back to our maps, as it seems Cornifer got a little lazy when filling these out. You'll need to buy some items from Cornifer's wife located in Dirtmouth, the game's hub town, in order to fill out the missing details on these maps. You only fill in these details when you rest at a bench, and after you've explored areas that aren't fully mapped out. They really don't like to make it easy for you. In fact, They want you to get lost in this world. There are more than a few interesting secrets tucked away in the corners of Hallownest, just waiting to be discovered. This was my second playthrough of the game, and I still got lost more than a few times. Granted, my first playthrough was a few years ago, but still. Exploration is a big part of the game that becomes so much more fun once you unlock more movement options like dashes, double jumps, and wall clings. There is more backtracking than I would have liked, mostly due to getting lost, but there's usually fun little secrets to discover in areas you think you've cleared out. Thankfully, there's also a handy-dandy fast travel system that allows you to zip across the world pretty easily, and in a game like this, that's a feature I really don't take for granted. That's just one part of the game though, as the other part comes down to the combat. What I really love about the combat is that it never seems to get in the way of your movement. You can freely attack while moving and it doesn't slow you down. You can even attack in different directions and use this as a way to pogo jump on enemies and hazards. As you attack and defeat enemies, you build up your soul meter, which you can use to unleash special attacks like shooting out a giant fireball. You can even use a heal, which leaves you vulnerable while casting it, so you have to make sure that you have an opening before doing so. I didn't make much use of the heal in my challenge run, since I died in one hit anyways, but you'd normally be trying to use it as much as you can. I really like this combat system because it encourages being aggressive in your approach. The more damage you deal, the more soul you build up, which then lets you use cool special attacks or heal. And fighting bosses is a big highlight of the experience. When they don't die in one hit, that is. They're challenging, yet very rewarding. Each of their attacks is animated enough for you to be able to predict and evade their moves, provided you spend the time to study their attack patterns and learn how to dodge or counter them. Each boss encounter feels unique and challenging in different ways, though I have to admit, it was also very satisfying to completely trample over these bosses in my challenge run. Except for the ones that cheated, but I'll get to that later. Normally every time you take damage, the screen freezes for like a second. The audio kind of fades out and it gives you a second to process that you took damage, as well as what you should do next. It makes every hit you take feel impactful and in a way encourages you to stop making the same mistakes. At least that's kind of what I see people say about this sometimes. It's been a while since my normal playthrough and every time I got hit, I just died. It certainly made me want to stop getting hit. And did it help me not get hit? No. But I was never too discouraged at a loss. I think one of the things that really makes Hollow Knight stand out is that combat and movement don't feel like they get in the way of each other. The same dashes and wall clings you use to explore can also be used to dodge attacks, and some attacks can be used to pogo jump on enemies to reach higher areas. This makes combat, as well as movement and exploration, feel like natural extensions of each other. As they're both such a big focus of the game, this is a really great thing. As some of the platforming challenges are just as difficult, if not even more difficult than some bosses. And I love how seamless the transition from platforming to fighting is. The first thing many people will notice about Hollow Knight are its striking visuals. That's because a vast majority of what you see on screen was hand-drawn. Yeah, I can't imagine all the painstaking work that went into animating this beautiful looking game. That work paid off in spades though. Hollow Knight ends up being a game with a very melancholic atmosphere. Some places are very dark and lonely feeling. Others are straight up terrifying and unsettling. The sound design plays very well with this. Hearing the disturbing sounds of possibly thousands of insects crawling and skittering about in the deep nest never fails to send a chill down my spine. At the same time, the music can be quite calming and relaxing, like what you hear playing in the City of Tears. Each area feels quite visually distinct from each other, yet every location still looks gorgeous on their own. The Crystal Peak has this nice lavender hue, and sounds echo throughout these vast caves. All of this is in stark contrast to the Hive's topaz themes, where the hum of bees follows you every step. It's set in an underground bug kingdom, which sounds like it should look much more gross than it does, although it can be quite gross at times. Yet I love how unique this theme is, and how every location plays into building up this vast and mysterious lore. I mentioned this before, but a big part of the fun when fighting bosses is studying their attacks so you can dodge or counter, and this is so much easier to do when you consider how well animated these enemies are. Plenty of NPCs are animated in quite unique ways as well, which adds to the character coming off as goofy, lazy, or downright creepy. Although, to be fair, with a name like Leg Eater, this guy doesn't have to do much else to be creepy. Here comes a new challenger! The challenge, as always, was a simple one. Beat the game on a difficulty similar to the Devil May Cry series' Heaven or Hell mode, in which both the player and enemies die in a single hit. To accomplish this, I installed 2 mods. The first was Radiant Soul, which lets you one-shot enemies, aside from a few cheaters. The second was Customizable MinMax damage, which allows you to set the minimum and maximum damage that you take. At first, I tried using One Mask Knight to just set myself to 1 mask of health, but I was getting some weird glitches, so instead I went with min-max damage. I set both the min and max damage to 10 masks of health, since normally I think the maximum amount of masks you can get is 9. You can technically get more than 9 masks, but this requires using charms or some temporary buffs to go over 9 masks, and since I wasn't going to do any of that, 10 worked just fine. Going into the challenge, I was curious what would be more deadly, general hazards or enemies. Since both would kill me in one hit anyways, what were the true dangers of Hollow Nest? It was hard to classify some things, like these giant worms which act more like hazards but are technically living creatures. I think I ended up classing them as hazards, though I can't 100% remember. Either way, I kept track of all my deaths on pen and paper, so place your bets for hazards or enemies now. The answer is kinda close. Closer than you might expect, at least. One thing I learned real fast is that I now have to play the game like it's Spelunky. If I just drop down from ledges without looking, it probably meant certain death. There's tons of enemies and hazards that just kind of chill right off screen waiting to ambush you. And some of these ambushes just felt blatantly unfair. Simply navigating the world became the biggest and deadliest hazard. I can't tell you how many times I died to an enemy just spawning under me, or by falling into spikes or something. Oh wait, actually I can. I was keeping count. But we'll save that for after. Boss fights, on the other hand, ended up a complete joke. Except for the multi-phase bosses that don't like to follow the rules. Some of these guys kind of caught me off guard, not gonna lie. I think it's because I felt kind of invincible against most enemies, but who could blame me? Do you know how powerful you feel after one-shotting some of the most difficult boss encounters in the game? Just take a look. I guess I felt kinda full of myself and let the multi-phase bosses catch me off guard. Honestly, I had a rougher time than I was expecting to with this challenge. Some enemies were just very annoying to fight. Some ambushes and traps are just straight up unfair. Just traveling from point A to point B can be a total nightmare because if you make one simple mistake, you have to start that journey all over again. Overall though, I thought it was a very fun challenge. I'm by no means a Hollow Knight expert. I know there's people who do no damage speedruns, which is way harder than this challenge, but I still had a lot of fun with this playthrough, and it proved more challenging than I thought it would at times. Yes, it's finally time for the results. Did you place those bets yet? Hollow Knight has a few different endings. I at least wanted to get the ending where I defeated the Radiants, which involves doing a few extra things. I have to say, though, that for most of the game, between enemies and hazards, enemies were proving themselves deadlier. Especially the small, hard-to-hit ones, or the ones that use projectiles. However, in order to reach my chosen ending, I needed to complete the Path of Pain. The hardest platforming challenge in the game. I'll lay it out for you like this. Before Path of Pain, I died exactly 180 times to enemies and 80 times to hazards. Nice round numbers to work with. That is 30.769238%, or roughly 3 out of 10 deaths were to hazards. Then, Path of Pain. From Path of Pain, I died once to an enemy, making 181 deaths, and 68 times to the hazards, meaning that Path of Pain killed me 69 times. Nice. And now I had 148 hazard deaths. Afterwards, I died another 5 times to enemies, and 3 times to hazards, before beating the game. This brings our grand total to 186 enemy deaths, and 151 hazard deaths. Even if you kill everything in one hit, the enemies still prove themselves deadlier than the hazards, as long as you also die in one hit. 337 total deaths in a 15-hour playthrough. This game has a lot of content in it, especially after all the free DLC that was released. All that said and done, let's take a look at the leaderboard. This game is more than deserving of a first spot ranking on the leaderboard. That doesn't mean it's a perfect game, but I don't believe any game can be truly perfect. And this game, despite its flaws, sits at the pinnacle of its genre. Hollow Knight is a fantastic game with tons of content that we didn't even really get to talk about in this video. Though a big part of all the fun is discovering all these secrets for yourself, or overcoming great challenges and uncovering the mysterious lore. It's a very difficult game that's easy to get lost in or feel discouraged by. The backtracking may feel pointless and irritating, but the combat and movement are satisfying to master. The visuals are strikingly beautiful, and the world building is very intriguing. There's a reason why so many people seem to love this game. It's just amazing. If you're even slightly intrigued, then I recommend you give the game a try. Make sure to temper your expectations and try to stick with it, even when it gets tough, because it's very rewarding once you make it through. Hey, if you like these videos, I'll have a lot more interesting ones coming out in the near future, so stay tuned for that. And if you want to try out this challenge yourself, I'll have links in the description to the mods that I used. They aren't too hard to install. If there's anything kind of tricky, I'll write up a little tutorial in the description, but I think that the mod pages themselves have all the information you need to install these things. The mods I used are hosted on nexusmods.com. You'll need to make an account to download the mods, but other than that, it's a fairly simple process. And of course, if you like this video, thanks. It really does mean a lot. I appreciate you and everything you do. Ciao.